And welcome everyone to a USTA chat. I'm Andy Katz, pleased to be joined by the illustrious Dick Gould, who was at Stanford from 1967 to 2004, 17 national titles, has coached some of the best in the game. We're going to talk about that and how you build a college tennis program and what needs to happen here going forward to save this sport that we all love. So let's first go back because we're coming off the US Open. We got the French Open coming up. Obviously, John McEnroe, Patrick McEnroe for ESPN, doing the commentating. The Bryan brothers are retiring. So I'm just curious from your vantage point, how did you know then what they would become as pros?
Well, Mac was easy because John was in the semis of Wimbledon before he entered Stanford. I was just keeping my fingers crossed every time the phone rang every day. I thought it'd be John saying, "Coach, I've decided I'm going to go pro." And fortunately, he stayed. I didn't even know till when he came to the airport. In those days, you could pick him up, and I went to pick him up at the airport, and he called me. He said, "Coach, I'm here. Well, you meet me at Terminal so and so." And I said, "Who's this?" He said, "John McEnroe." I said, "I thought you turned pro. I gave your scholarship away." So we had a great time with that. But John was already there before I recruited. Well, he had a good spring his senior year. He played a lot of Bill Reardon's tournaments in the East Coast then and evenings, and he had a good spring. I played all summer long, and so he was already a commodity. I was lucky that he ended up going to school for 1 year, and I think he enjoyed that year as a student and as an athlete as well. It's interesting because recruiting takes so many forms, and if you're at a Harvard or a Yale or a Stanford, you pretty much look at test scores and grades first, and then you can recruit. But until you do that, you can't recruit anybody. And the list is so small that really it's not so much identifying the players, it's identifying the students. And once you do that, then you look at their playing ability, and it's your job to get those who are potentially admittable to apply, number one, and follow all the guidelines and rules and application deadlines for application. And then to, once they get accepted, if that's the case, to be sure they enroll. So that's more the process. It's not so much going out and scurrying under the bushes and branches and leaves. And very frankly, I went really heavily in rankings then, and I would start sending notes to kids when they're freshmen in high school, whatever the NCAA rules are, a lot of the time, regularly from if they're in the top 20 in the country or reach the final 16 at Kalamazoo, something like that, to get their grades and get an idea how they were doing as students. So that was the process, and then you whittle it down pretty fast from there.
And the Bryan brothers?
Same thing. They were straight A students at their high school, both of them, and had just a couple of great teacher recs. Very interesting in my recruit visit to their home. It was where I used to ride my horse. My dad's a farmer, and we had a little ranch right there. Small ranch is the wrong word to think, not a Texas ranch, a California farm. And I'd ride my horse through the subdivision where they now live. And of course, Kathy has a horse herself and rides a lot, the mom. But when I visited the home, there was no TV set. There was a keyboard on one side of the room, piano. There was a set of drums on the other side of the room, and the parents didn't allow them to watch TV. It was do your studies, and you want to play a little music for diversion, fine, and that's about it. So it was a very different recruiting experience for me. Ironically, my first 2 years at Stanford, when we played Cal Santa Barbara, their number one player was Wayne Bryant, who I didn't really know too much. I think we beat him one time, and he beat us, got us the next time. But he was a good college player. And of course, Kathy was top 20 in the world in women's tennis, and so there was tennis in their blood, and the club where their dad was a teaching pro, Camarillo Country Club, was a club that my folks belonged to when I was a kid, and I used to play golf there, not tennis.
So Dick, if you look at just what has happened recently, first of all, top American right now is still John Isner, last time I checked, and he obviously played at Georgia. Jen Brady, semifinalist at the US Open. She won Lexington and played at UCLA. JJ Wolf, who I covered at Ohio State, won a couple of rounds before he lost to Medvedev at the US Open. Steve Johnson obviously had a great career at USC. Daniel Collins, Virginia. I could go on. Every pro player I've talked to, male or female, all looks just so, absolutely just loved their college experience, says how much it enriched them, made them a better teammate, and especially as they go off into being an individual in a individual sport, they long for that time when they were in college, if you will, in the team sport. How do we get to the point where players like that on a more consistent basis funnel through the college system before they turn pro?
It was easy in the old days when I started coaching. You weren't in college, you were in the Army. So it was your deferment in essence. So everybody played college tennis, and there was no pro tennis then. Open tennis started in 1968. It took a year or two to get it really going. I started in the fall of 66, 67 season. And so just before open tennis, before things really started to open up. I think that it's been really interesting to see the evolution of all this. At first, the college kids in the 70s and 80s went on and did a great job on the tour. I think we had 1 year in 83, I think we had 83 had 4 guys, Stanford guys, in at least the quarters of Wimbledon. Kathy Jordan, one of our women's players, in the quarters of the women's draw, beating Chrissy Everett to get there. We had the next year, 482, I think we had 8 guys in the final 32 at Wimbledon. They'd won 3 rounds. We had 10 guys in the top 100 at some point in the world for about 10 or 15 straight years. It was still really the pathway, and you might turn pro before you graduated, but you got a year or 2 of seasoning under your belt. And then there became this push you got to get out there early. You got to go now. You got to do it now. You got to get out there and get that experience. And I think it really held us back a little bit in our development of players. I think the college system is an incredible thing. And in today's world, with players playing so much longer, there's no rush right now, especially. That's the advantage college tennis has right now. So you get out of your junior year, you finish up in the 18s, and then you spend a couple of years, hopefully, and maybe even more, 3 or 4 to get through college. And then you go out on the pro tour, you're stronger, which you must be now, the way you're hitting the ball, the way you have to move. You've had a lot of strength training, a lot of cardiovascular work. Your game's had a chance to mature. And you've had a little bit of a chance to have a new experience in your life. It's not get up, go to high school, boom, 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 all set up by your parents or your pro coach or whoever. You have a little freedom, and you have the freedom to make mistakes and make choices and to learn from them. And it's a tremendous time for growth, including learning how to position yourself in your athletic development. And I think we're coming back to that more now. And it's just to see how JJ's done. John's still hanging around. God bless him. Stevie Johnson had a great career. I just don't know injury-wise how he's going to come back from all of that. I think that Jen Brady's performance at US Open, great coaching with Stella and Rance down at UCLA, is really a big statement for college tennis. And I certainly don't think college tennis slows you down. I think the ranking system's changed a little bit too over the period of time when I coached. It used to be my guys could go out and they could play 3 or 4 months in the summer, and they could get enough points to get to the top 100 in the world, then come back to school. And when they left in June, then they'd still have those points would still be with them, and they could turn pro and get straight into Wimbledon. So that encouraged them to stay for an extra year of school. Danny Gould and Jeff Tarango are a couple of great examples of that. And then the rankings became, you keep your best of 16 or 18 or whatever it is now, and you throw out all your bad results. So it protected the players up higher in the rankings, and it became harder to break in. And now, I think a player now, I think realistically, most players take about 1.5 years to 2 years, year and a half, 2 years on the pro tour to catch up with those of their peers who went out when they left the juniors straight into pro ranks and catch up with them. But invariably they do. It just takes a little longer because mostly of the ranking system.
Well, and I would also add that I think the mental health aspect, the actual human maturity, cannot be undervalued of just going through that process, that life process, before you're thrust onto your own. And yes, you can make obviously a fair amount of money if you're successful. Others obviously are struggling at the bottom, but and to manage actually other people, your coach, your physio, all those things, you got to be mature how to handle that, especially if your parents are not necessarily doing that. So all those are pros, I think, to going to college. So let's go back now to building a team. One of the reasons that I've heard from athletic directors as to why it's been on the chopping block is sometimes they're looking at, okay, let me look at this roster. And if this roster is heavily foreign, does it make it easier to cut that sport as they're looking at, their budgets and all that? I may disagree with that, but there needs to obviously be more of a push for as much American talent as you can get in, or North American talent as you can. How does a coach right now balance that need to get the best players in the world versus knowing that you also need to have a roster that's going to be representative of this country if you need to prove to an athletic director, whomever, a decision maker, that yes, this is a program that is representative of our region, our state, our city, our country?
Andy, that's a great question. And I think a couple of parts to it. First of all, I was on the ITA, Intercollegiate Tennis Association Advocacy Committee for a while when Dave Benjamin was the executive director. And I told Dave I'd be happy to be on this committee, but it's really hard for me to write the university president or AD who's dropping tennis and say that, hey, if it's a state school and state supported by taxpayers, if it's predominantly a foreign team. And so the first thing I said, otherwise I'm happy to support it, and I feel I can. So the first thing I would do for any school that's cut, I go to their roster and see how many foreigners there are. And if there are more than potentially 2 starters in the top 6, I did not feel in good faith I could write these president or AD, especially of a state supported school. And I didn't do it. On the other hand, we forget we were all foreign at one time. We were all immigrants to the United States. And so in my experience, I have rarely seen, I don't think I've ever seen in my experience, played against, first of all, I never offered a scholarship to a foreign player. Well, no, I take that back. I talked to Bjorn Borg, I talked to Vilas, and Buster Macham. They would have had scholarships if they had decided to go to school. But I never ended up giving a scholarship to a foreign player because we were able to get Americans at the top level. And I felt as long as I did that, I could compete with any foreigners coming in. But before, that being said, I can't talk down to that because we're all foreign, and the players I've seen who come here, number one, have been serious about their studies. Their teammates have benefited, and school has benefited by having them in school. Most of them have stayed in this country and are working here now. Many of them are college coaches and are doing a great job in development in tennis in the United States. So I think sometimes people say, well, coach never had a foreigner on scholarship at Stanford, therefore he doesn't like foreigners. I think that's not true, and that's not fair. But I was slow to advocate for a team that I saw had mostly foreigners on the roster. I can see how that program might be being dropped. On the other hand, what's our job? What's our charge?
To win.
As a member, as a teaching pro for many years, my job is to turn out better Americans who can compete with these foreigners. And that goes back to what we're trying to do with our development program. Martin Blackman's doing a great job with the USTA and player development. And we have to have more of these players like Jen Brady coming along, being well taught by their own pros. And I think we're seeing more and more emphasis placed on that, and we'll see more Americans coming through the system.
And I want to be clear here. I love the fact that we live in a global world. I love when foreign students are on these college campuses. I'm just playing devil's advocate for the athletic director, who may be looking at the bottom line. Okay, what is the roster makeup here? Because I do think it enhances to have multiple cultures, on any roster, regardless of sport. The other aspect of this, and this is something that I'm pushing, that I'm curious your aspect of this, that especially a place like Stanford, a private institution, so many of these athletic facilities are beautiful buildings that are built for their own athletes. But tennis is one of the few sports on a college campus that actually could produce revenue, because you could actually have this be a community, and this has happened in some places around the country, but a community facility where you actually could bring in revenue when your teams aren't using it for juniors, adults, what have you, as long as you work out the schedule. And obviously the priority would be the school. How critical is that, as these ADs are looking at the bottom line, to make your facility a community facility so that it can be also a revenue producer?
I don't think there's any question. It's critical. It's not easy. First of all, these questions now we're starting to get into, Andy, as I see them evolving here. I don't think anyone's really an expert on there's no one answer. Every situation is different. I certainly don't know it all. I knew my situation in Stanford, in our local area, where I was a teaching pro for a while and grew up pretty well. But even for me, I was there a long time. It took me about 10 or 12 years before I ever thought of fundraising. And then it was a matter of saying the light bulb went off and say, if I want something, no one's going to help me. I got to go out and do it. I think before we do this, there are a couple of things I'd like to address. I think Title IX is incredible. I've had three daughters who are college athletes in different sports. Two of them captain of their college teams, not tennis, either one, different sports, who really have benefited from Title IX. And yet that's been a threat to men's tennis. And now the programs are being dropped roughly equally in the last over 60 in the last, since the school year started last year, and more since COVID. But I don't think Title IX is really the culprit anymore. I mean, we settled in after that a little bit. When push comes to shove, it may well be. We're not, first of all, Title IX is not done yet. We're not balanced with what we spend for women's sports and men's sports. We're not balanced in our coaching staffs. If you really believe in Title IX, I think you should be hiring a women's coach for a women's team, as an example. It's our job to develop those coaches and make them better at what they do, if that happens to be the case. But I think it's a little bit of hypocrisy to say, oh yes, we're Title IX, and then start hiring men's coaches. I think that's talking out two sides of your mouth. The other player here, and this is what people say COVID, but COVID is a great excuse for an athletic director. Football's gotten out of hand, and we have to make up our mind. And I'm talking now a Power 5 conference, which kind of sets a tone in many ways. We can't go on under the guise of education and nonprofit institutions and run a big business simultaneously. And college athletics are now a big business. When our football and basketball coaches are making more than any other employee in the state, including the governor, and that's been going on for years in 40 out of 50 states. When they're getting $6, $7, $8 million a year salary, when the football athletes are getting more and more and more. It used to be room, board, tuition, and fees. Now it's room, board, tuition, fees, trip home, sundry expenses, living expenses. The cost per scholarships are going up and up and up and up. Something's got to give. And then all of a sudden, I've always wondered, I thought it'd be TV, Andy. I thought something would happen and we hit an economic recession and the advertisers have to pull out of TV. And, Big Ten, Pac-12, we signed these 10, SEC signed these 10-year contracts. And that's all fine for the colleges, because once they sign the contract, they spend that money that's get promised to them for the next 10 years before right now. They don't wait and spend it when they get it. They spend it right now on facilities and the arms race and things like that. And I've always wondered, if we had a big economic recession, some of these advertisers had to pull out and the TV guys couldn't honor their commitments, for these schools being out. And I thought it might be more of a recession that would cause this than a COVID thing. But COVID hasn't helped us at all. But I don't think that can be the excuse. I think college athletics is on very flimsy ground before we even get in this discussion. Now, that being said, and that's my personal view.
Okay.
It's not, we're running a big business or trying to, under the guise, without any federal control, of a nonprofit. And I just don't think that's right, very frankly. I don't see how we can do that. But that's not the state of the world. So now we're dealing with the state of the world as it is. And when we do that, we're talking about having to exist and do more than exist, actually be self-sufficient. I think the thing I was probably most proud of at Stanford, not so much the 17 championships, but the fact that when I left there as the director of tennis, our entire men's program was endowed. The director of tennis position, my position, the head coaching position, the assistant coaching position, the scholarships, which are $75,000 a year plus now for a full scholarship at Stanford, the operating budget, and even a maintenance endowment that Drew brought in about $100,000 a year for court resurfacing, repairs, nets, things like that. And that's great. We all say, well, let's get endowed. Well, it took me, being slow, it took me over 50 years to do this. And it's a lot of money. What is an endowment? You're given a gift of $100,000. It sounds like a lot. So you put it in a fund and you say, this is my endowed fund. And you can only take out of the endowment the amount that it earns each year. In a good year economically, it might be around, let's just say 10%, take a round number, which is optimistic, but it can be that. And so now we have $10,000 of earnings. If I'm any kind of athletic director, I'm going to take part of those earnings and plow them back into the principal. At Stanford, it happens to be 5% or half of it. So that's 5%. So now my $100,000 is $105,000 in principal for next year. So that helps the principal keep up with inflation. But that leaves me only half of that $10,000 expendable to spend. So can you imagine how many millions of dollars I have to raise to endow a program where I'm earning $5,000 of expendable funds on a $100,000 gift? It's a long, long road. So that may be unrealistic. We're talking pretty much short term right now, but I think that in the end is everyone's goal. And when you say endowed, I think you have to talk about every facet of the program: the pencils, the pens, the secretaries, the strength coaches that you have to pay a proportion, and so on.
Let me stop you here, Dick, and just say that obviously Stanford and Duke and some of these places are its own. So I'm dealing with your state school that's got a nice facility. How do you make that facility for the community to not just financially bring money in, but also show the value of this program, that the people in the community are saying, whoa, don't you even dare think of cutting this because I use it too.
And no, you're exactly right. So what I started to say was the endowment is, that's a dream, and it's not realistic most places, period, frankly. So don't be talking about raising endowment money. Most of it's not going to work. Stanford just cut 11 sports. And of those, they said we're pretty much endowed. Well, when I looked into it, it was like $1 million, $2 million, and that doesn't come close. So I think that's out the window to think of realistic. We're talking about living day to day. Frankly, we're talking about holding on by a thread. And I think the first thing we have to try to do is make our program personal to our community. We have to get people involved in the program. And how do we do that? And there have been some coaches really, really successful. Tim Cash is a great example. Have been really successful in doing this. So there are several coaches. I think you have to bring the public to your players. People don't want to support someone in a uniform out there who they don't know, they never meet, got headgear on, he's all padded up. It's not personal. In tennis and golf, we have tremendous opportunities. We're sitting close to players. They're people. They're not in uniform. They're just wearing we wear every day. And we all play tennis, or we all play golf, or someone in our family does. So we have to bring those people into our program. And we do that by having, I know when we first started doing this, it's hard to get people coming to matches, first of all. I think that's sometimes a fallacy. So most of our at least half our matches are played during the week at 2:30 or so in the afternoon. People are working. Kids have their schoolwork. They have their own sports activities. The only people are going to get there are retirees and maybe a few members of your own student body, but they also have their own activities or are playing sports or intramurals themselves. So you can't really rely on that. It sounds good, but I've never had a lot of success with our own students. I think we're talking about doing things that bring people in, such as maybe a play day. USTA's really been supportive. We have worked really close with USTA NorCal. And I think every school's got to work closely with their USTA section. There are all kinds of play days they have. Why can't they be on college campuses and bring people in? You have not only your varsity team, but you have your club team. And I think we're really not thinking out of the box as coaches. We don't take advantage of those players that are not quite good enough to be on our team. They're playing club tennis, a USTA program, which is incredible, and a resource for us as well. We can get them involved in our varsity program by having a play day where the club team comes in and blind draw. They play a little round robin. Members of our team get to know the team a little better on court, not just friends in dormitories, but on court. Then we have a fundraiser where we're inviting members of the community to come in and play with our team, and the club team can help out because they know us a little better. It gets them involved as well. And this is what we started doing. We started having things with adults because they're the ones with the money, and you can hook them to the kids as well. But we did a lot of work with the adults. They come in and pay $100 and play for 3 hours with little doubles mixers with the team. Started with men, then Title IX came around, and we right away did it with our women's program. We did it together, most of our fundraisers, which was really successful. And so bringing people in for this, bringing them in for USTA play days, having club opening up the school if you can. And Stanford's got a little backwards on this lately, but if you can, bringing people into the campus to play league tennis. The rental fees we charge for USTA league programs, they're crying for courts usually. They can't even get on their own club courts because they take up too much space and too much time. Charging rental for that, the rental income. We actually showed a profit by the time we took our rental from camp income that the university charged for the athletic department charge. Took our camp rental, we took our USTA rental fees or other outside groups that came in and used facilities, and that was a big thing in helping make us self-sufficient, more than our ticket sales. I think just getting the team involved off the court with the public is important too. We'd have post-match receptions. We would have special seating for people in the area. You don't need a big seating area. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it's a special area where people can sit, and those people who have played in some of these events can feel special and can join the team because of then their stature or their participation for a post-match reception, which doesn't cost much. In fact, oftentimes a couple of your boosters will put it on and help out with a couple of bottles of wine and some soft drinks and some cold cuts or something like that. Getting people to know the players is the biggest thing ever. And then you can go from there and do trips. We would take a trip every Thanksgiving time with our men's team and our women's team. And we would take people with us, and they'd pay a fee to go with us that would pay for the team's airfare and so on. The coaches would put on a clinic for these people. And the people on the trip would end up hitting with the players, and they loved it. And get to know the players really well for 4 or 5 days. Hawaii, could be Mexico in the old days before the rules changed, or Caribbean, didn't matter. It didn't cost the athletic department anything, but it was a contact point. It made us really get close, players really get close with the people who then, and the players don't have so much time, so you can't lean on them all the time. You have to sell them. They're used to receiving. You have to sell your team that they have a responsibility to give back. And the program's only going to survive wherever you are if you give back. When you give back, you get returned 10 times that much. And so you can't call them on all the time, but you have to be able to call them at the right time and know they'll be there and support you and give their best. These are people that are going to be hiring in the future. They're going to be getting them internships and so on.
Yeah, I want to be clear. Everything I'm saying is post-pandemic, inviting everyone on these campuses. All right, last thing, Dick, just your overall view on where the college game is now, whether it's pro or con, in terms of where it is now and hopefully where it's going here in the future to bigger and better things on the court, the way the game is being played.
Well, I'm a first strike guy. I like that serve and volley. I like to see a guy coming off the return. I hate to see teams staying way back and the umpire's chair stand spraining his ankle back there or something like that. He's so far back. So it's a different game when I was coaching. The heyday of my coaching was all built around first strike tennis. So that's different. I still think serve and volley has a place. You see a guy standing 99 feet behind the baseline, you're trying to serve 130 miles an hour, and you can't serve that wide serve, slice it out wide. You can't serve the kick serve to the back end, the ad court. I'm going, what's going on? So the game's changed. I'm not sure our game that we've adjusted enough to take advantage of it. I think that we're missing that. I think I would still be a big proponent of being really sure that all my players had a very good net game, felt comfortable up there. I think doubles has helped, and doubles is a big attraction to college tennis. I think we really can refine those skills in doubles, although doubles now largely is serve and stay back as well. So I'm a bad one to ask about. Don't get me on that topic, but I still think first strike tennis has a place, and I'm anxious to see the guys brought up with that. I'm anxious to see if Stanford's come along when he won his last big Grand Slam against Agassi, I think it was, he was probably one of the only serving volleyers still out there, and he beat the whole field of the backcourters who were excelling with that big topspin and loop at that time by serving and volleying. So I still think there's a place for someone who's brought up with it. It'd be a fun experiment. I love where the college game is. I think it's exciting. I would love to see more mixed events. We started the first NCAA as co-ed. That was our bid that did that. And I think it's been a big help, a big hit. I think people like to see men and women playing together. We played a lot of matches, in fact, some ITA matches that had a World Team Tennis 4 match. We had a national championship with that at Stanford one year, and people loved it. And we got people come out. They were a whole team of 8 people were housed in boosters' home, a woman in one home, and men in another. It was really fun. We played the Golden Gators in World Team Tennis. We played indoors with 5,000-6,000 people against USC, against Trinity, against Cal. We always played a mixed match with Cal. People love to see men and women playing together. And I think, frankly, Andy, if I were coaching right now and I felt that our program was threatened, before I let them cut them, I would go to the athletic director and say, listen, athletic director, there's a tremendously attractive option out here. If you're not going to let us have a men's team, where we can have 6 singles and 3 doubles, how about letting us have one team, and a women's team is the same? How about letting us have one team where we have 2 coaches, not 4, but that's saving the sport, remember. We have 2 coaches, not 4. We play a World Team Tennis format. People love it. It's done in 2.5 hours. You see a lot of different variety. Maybe instead of 1 men's singles, play 2 men's singles, 2 women's singles, 2 men's doubles, 2 women's doubles. But you only need 5-6 players on each team, and it cuts your cost in half. And I'd rather do that than lose the sport entirely on a campus. And I think that's something that we might want to think about a little bit in our back pocket. But I love the college game, and I really think it has place in player development. I think it's increasingly going to come back to that. It's just too much of a struggle for the players out there to get into that top in the world where they can barely break even, let alone make money. It's just the climb up through the tournaments is just too tough.
Look, so you saved the best for last. I love that idea of World Team Tennis format. Mixed doubles, I think, certainly is something that everyone loves, that I know, loves playing in it. It's something you can play for the rest of your life. And certainly it could really be incredibly competitive at the highest level in college tennis. And you're right, a great way to save the sport.
If it comes down to that, at worst, that's an option, and I don't think we ought to overlook it, especially in the divisions where you don't have football supposedly making some money, or where we just can't raise enough ourselves. I think if we're getting close here, Andy, there are a couple things I'd like to leave just thoughts on the table.
Yes, last word.
One is, I think that as a coach, we have to realize that coaching is only a part of the job. And we have to find some way to manage our team and give them the time they need, and still have at least half of our day devoted to the promotion of our sport within our community. And I think I say community outside of the college community. The college community is not going to support us that much. We might have professor of the week as the players select, a team member selects his favorite professor to be honored at a week or something like that. But basically, it's outside the school community. I think we have to remember the coach sets the example of everything. We can't say, be a good citizen, give back, if we're not doing the same thing. And I would be on several nonprofit boards and so on, just because I thought it was setting a good example for my kids to give back. We have to take ownership ourselves. We have to be responsible for ourselves and what we're trying to do. I think as a coach, if you have any successes, that heritage is important. If you can build some kind of feeling of respect in your program, if you have someone who does anything well, be sure that player gets recognized. If it's something really major, be sure it's really, really recognized. Memorial of some kind. Make the players feel good about themselves and who they're following. Assume if you want to get anything done, you have to do it yourself. Fundraising, a great example of that. Don't wait for it to be given to you. It's not going to happen in today's world. If you need something, raise money to do it. I never raised general money, and really, I raised specific money. We had a lot of serious little projects. We had to get umpire stands. That was a project. We had to have, that's what we play this little round robin for this mixer for. Then we have to start raising money for our back bleachers. So we're doing this series of project activities to help raise money for that and so on. So little things. I think as a coach, it's like it's a teacher, in anything. We have to try to make ourselves, as we do our team, we always think about our team, but we have to get a little better each day ourselves. We can't go out on that court without feeling when we leave the court that, hey, I was a little better today. I learned something today from my players, from my opponents, from my opposing coaches, from my peers, whatever. I learned something today. I am a little better. And I think we have to always look to be creative. And, we can do these things and do it and have fun doing it. We can make these activities fun. We used to have a tournament called the Champagne Chips, and we'd play on, I think the largest one, we had 44 private courts in the area. And it raised money for our inner city program, East Palo Alto Tennis and Tutoring, which we're aligned with very closely as a program. And we go out and play on private courts, 3 hours mixed doubles C, and then 3 hours of men's doubles B, and then all doubles. We had, I think, 1,400 players, our biggest one. And the kids would go out on the team, and they would be court captains, men's and women's team. They'd sit on the court and run the tournament on that court for that day. And we did the whole thing in like a quick weekend. The winners on the courts came to one club and the next day and played off the finals. But it was fun. And players loved it. They came back. They were in charge of being sure no one had more than 4 bottles of champagne out of that case for any one of the 3-hour periods. And I never saw that's all supposed to be returned to me. I never saw any returned bottles. I don't know what fraternity party they end up in, but have fun with what you're doing. The Thanksgiving trips, the team trips you take them to an event with you. If you're going down to La Jolla Pacific Coast Doubles, you're going to the Hall of Fame in Newport for an event or playing there or taking your team there. Take some other people with you. Get them involved with the team that way. Those are just things I think that I would caution people on, maybe things to think about as you're working.
Well, Dick Gould, always a pleasure. Unbelievable fountain of knowledge. You've given so much to the game. We appreciate it. Stay safe, and hopefully a lot of your ideas hopefully will come to fruition here.